By March of 1945, the battleship USS Texas had seen combat throughout the world. She had been there for the Allied invasions of North Africa, of Normandy, of southern France, before being sent to the Pacific. She spent Christmas 1944, Pearl Harbor, before going to fight in the Battle of Iwo Jima. But despite her long service, she wasn't done yet, because Texas was on her way to one of the most dangerous operations of the Second World War, where her mighty 14-inch guns would support the invasion of Okinawa. It is history that deserves to be remembered.
Texas arrived in the Caroline Islands on March 10, 1945, after having supported the landing and capture of Iwo Jima. The U.S. Navy had set up a staging area in the Caroline Islands at a small atoll called Ulithi. The atoll became the secret center of operations in the late war Pacific and was converted into a naval station by Service Squadron 10 and others in a handful of months, beginning in October 1944. The Texas's arrival was part of the buildup preceding Operation Iceberg, the amphibious invasion of Okinawa, the least populated and smallest of the 5 Japanese main islands. That March, the number of ships anchored at the naval base peaked at 722. 11 days later, Texas departed the atoll along with Task Force 54, the gunfire covering force, commanded by Rear Admiral Morton L. Deo aboard the USS Tennessee. Texas was a part of Task Force 54's Unit 1, along with the battleship USS Maryland, heavy cruiser Tuscaloosa, and 4 Fletcher-class destroyers. Task Force 54 included a number of older battleships, including the Arkansas, Colorado, Nevada, Idaho, West Virginia, New Mexico, and New York. In all, 18 U.S. battleships participated in the Battle of Okinawa. Texas arrived off the southeastern coast of Okinawa on March 25th. She was preceded by large fleet elements which had arrived through the month, and on the 25th she began pre-invasion bombardment. A bugle call, followed by the cry for general quarters, sent men to their battle stations, where they would stay for weeks. The crew of the battleship Texas remained at battle stations for more than 50 days, beginning on March 25th, when they arrived off Okinawa at 7 a.m. On a Navy ship, being at battle stations meant manning nearly everything on the ship, and no crew member was without an assignment. Anything non-essential was halted. All watertight doors were shut in case of damage to reduce flooding, and none could be opened without permission. Soldiers donned helmets and life jackets and remained on alert. Resources to many systems that weren't vital during combat were switched off. For 50 days, the sailors were confined to their positions, whether that be in the crowded turrets, the gun tubs, or ammo lockers. Hundreds remained below deck, reloading the main guns at a moment's notice. Commitment to the station was essential to respond to any threat. Waste buckets were used rather than toilets. They were sent topside to be emptied, while food was lowered. There was no hot food, only sandwiches and K-rations. They were allowed, according to the National World War II Museum, showers and fresh clothes about every third day, but only briefly before returning to stations. Sleep could only come in snatches. The ship likely would have been boiling hot for most of the day under the Pacific sun. The final decision for the almost 2,000 sailors to remain at battle stations was made by the ship's captain, Charlie Baker. Few or no other ships made the same decision. The primary reason for remaining constantly at battle stations was the threat of kamikazes. Staying at stations meant that the crew could respond in seconds instead of minutes. By March of 1945, the Japanese Air Force had been hollowed out so that they turned to suicide attacks as their primary means of assault. At Iwo Jima, danger from the air was minimal, but Okinawa was near the main islands and faced numerous major airfields in Kyushu and Formosa. Planners estimated that the fleet would be in range of several thousand enemy aircraft. During the Battle of Okinawa, hundreds of Japanese sorties targeted American ships, seriously damaging numerous ships and sinking a number of smaller vessels, such as destroyer escorts, radar pickets, and landing ships. While considerably less effective, the Japanese also used suicide motorboats during the battle, successfully damaging numerous ships, including crippling the destroyer USS Hutchins. The goal of the pre-invasion bombardment was to soften up the defenses and to stir the in-place Japanese. The Japanese were heavily fortified on the island, but offered little in the way of return fire during the early days of the bombardment. According to the ship's after-action report, the ship rendered scheduled bombardments for 6 days, beginning on March 25th, and supported minesweeping operations and underwater demolition and reconnaissance missions to clear the beaches for the scheduled landing on April 1st. During the entire operation, the after-action report continues, this vessel was subjected to numerous air attacks. On March 29th, the crew spotted a downed Japanese pilot off the starboard bow. He was retrieved and brought on board Texas for initial investigation. He was a petty officer aviator who had been shot down the night before. and was transferred off the ship later the same day. April 1st was designated Love Day, and the first American troops landed at the Hagushi beaches to little resistance. Texas and Unit 1 did not fire on landing beaches, however, instead providing covering fire for a feint by the 2nd Marine Division further south to deceive the defenders and tie up possible reserves. Support for the feint operation continued on April 2nd. The ship retired to night retirement every day, but remained at battle stations. Kamikaze attacks tended to come at dawn and dusk, using the low light to become more difficult to spot. April 3rd saw an air attack at 2:45 a.m., and plane attacks continued on landing ships throughout the day in the coming weeks. Texas would provide almost constant fire support, refueling and resupplying at a nearby port established at the Kurama Islands. It was at Okinawa, still at battle stations around the clock, that the crew of the Texas learned of VE Day and the end of the war in Europe. In commemoration of the day, all 10 of Texas's 14-inch, as well as all the 3.5-inch guns, were fired at a single target, representing the most intense broadside the ship fired during the campaign. The battle was not without close calls. On April 7th, the ship maneuvered around a torpedo fired by an enemy plane. A few days later, a Japanese Betty plane crashed in flames just 50 yards from the ship. Crewmen watched as kamikaze struck the Tennessee and the destroyer Zellers. An underwater explosion felt by the ship was identified as the torpedo exploding at the end of its run. In mid-April, Texas participated in the bombardment of Lashima, a nearby island. It was there on April 18th that famed war correspondent Ernie Pyle was killed a few days later. Supporting that landing on April 16th, the men aboard the Texas spotted a plane flying low through smoke, headed straight at the ship. The plane was dodging and zigzagging at 10,000 yards, but approaching fast. The Texas maneuvered frantically to present the port beam to the plane and opened fire with all the guns that it could bear. At 5,000 yards, the plane was still coming, silhouetted against AA fire and smoke. At 3,000, it came on. 2,000, at 1,800 yards, it was shot down, crashing into the water. Texas remained safe. Concentrated fire made it difficult to identify which ship actually hit a plane for much of the fighting, but the Texas observed many planes sent tumbling into the water. The ship's lightly armed OS-2U Kingfisher spotting planes did their part, with one strafing and setting fire to 2 suspected suicide boats, while the second was forced to make an emergency water landing on April 27th after being hit by enemy anti-aircraft. The float plane sunk from damage, however the pilot and observer were rescued. On May 14th, 52 days after the ship had arrived at Okinawa, the USS Texas was ordered to the Philippines to prepare for the next expected amphibious invasion, one that promised to be even greater in scale than the one at Okinawa, the proposed Operation Downfall, an invasion of the Japanese home islands. While the crew was understandably relieved to finally return to a normal schedule and regular sleep, the situation on May 1945 promised more fighting, likely even more perilous than what they had already endured. The battle for Okinawa wasn't done, and the island was not declared captured until June 22nd. During the battle, the men of Texas had remained at their stations an almost unheard of amount of time, longer than any other ship in the fleet. Captain Baker believed that he had made the right decision. 16 U.S. ships were sunk by kamikazes during the battle, and 46 more were severely damaged by the swarms of Japanese fighters. According to an article from the National World War II Museum, no other ship is known to have kept its crew at general quarter for so long. It's difficult to know how effective the vigilance was, but the Texas didn't lose a single man during the battle. Men of the fleet just marvel how we stayed at general quarters for some 50 days, Captain Baker said. That is why I think we are here today. We were always ready for anything that should come up. They had been at battle stations when they learned of the surrender of Nazi Germany and the death of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. On April 15th, during morning air defense, the tired but heroic men of the Texas had held a memorial to the president, all without abandoning their posts. The unprecedented action was pointed out for particular praise in the after-action report. That the men took this without unique fatigue is a tribute to their spirit and physical condition. Their support of the invasion was significant as well. According to the after-action reports, guns of the Texas successfully neutralized strong points, fortified positions, pillboxes, and artillery emplacements in almost every case. It provided bombardment and close fire support through the 7 weeks it participated in the attack. The same ship that had been present in North Africa, at D-Day, at Dragoon, and Iwo Jima, gave its all in that last battle, firing an incredible amount of ammunition, judged to be around 4 full shiploads of munitions. This included 2,019 rounds of 14-inch ammunition, 2,643 rounds of 5-inch ammunition, 3,100 rounds of 40-millimeter, and 2,205 of 20-millimeter ammunition. It was more ammo than the ship had loosed at any of its previous actions. When the Texas arrived at Leyte Gulf on May 17th, the crew had no idea that their part in the war was over. Planning for future operations was already well underway, and the planned armada for the invasion of Kyushu would have been the largest ever assembled. Operation Coronet, which had been hypothetically scheduled for March 1st, 1946, would have seen an invasion of the largest Japanese island, Honshu. Of course, instead of a land invasion, the United States dropped nuclear weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in early August 1945, and combat ceased shortly after.
USS Texas was already an old battleship when the war began, and yet her service was exemplary. Her guns thundered almost from the moment that Americans engaged the enemy all the way up to the end of the war. And that a ship that was nearly 30 years old saw such success is a testament to the steadfast courage of the thousands of men who served on her, who faced hardships that we can hardly imagine today, and who deserve to be remembered. In August, Captain Baker was transferred off the ship, but he made a final speech to his crew. He said, "The people back home say that the Navy is made of iron, but really and truly, it is you men. The men of the Texas are made of iron."
Battleship Texas is currently out of the water for the first time in 32 years, and only the second time since she became a museum in 1948. Undergoing an intensive repair period, which will include having new hull plating installed to the sides of the ship from about 4 feet above the waterline down. These repairs will take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to complete. If you'd like to stay up to date on the work, feel free to check out their website at battleshiptexas.org or at their Battleship Texas YouTube channel. Both have regular updates posted to keep you appraised of the work that is currently going on. Come on, Texas! I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy. Check out our community on thehistoryguyguild.locals.com, our webpage at thehistoryguy.com, and our merchandise at teespring.com, or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo. And if you'd like more episodes on Forgotten History, all you have to do is subscribe.